Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Clara Reynolds nervously adjusted her handbag, glancing at her seat number. First class, a level of comfort she'd never experienced. She was nervous but excited. It was her first solo trip to New York for an important business meeting. As the plane filled up, a flight attendant approached her with a polite but firm smile. "Madam, we have a situation, your seat needs to be reassigned. Could you please follow along?" Clara frowned. "Excuse me? I think I'm perfectly happy where I am." But the flight attendant insisted, and in a few seconds, Clara was escorted to economy class, her belongings hastily thrown into the aisle. The other passengers' eyes fell upon her, some with pity, others with amusement. Her heart sank, a mixture of humiliation and anger. What she didn't know was that the person behind this expulsion was none other than her husband, Jonathan Reynolds, the billionaire owner of the airline. A man she hadn't seen since their discreet wedding, a man she thought lived thousands of miles away from her everyday life. And as Clara sat down, furious and confused, Jonathan watched the scene from the cockpit, invisible to her, a mixture of surprise and regret crossing his face. He had thought she would never have the chance to travel on one of his airlines, until today. Fate had just placed Clara in a situation she could never have imagined. Between public humiliation and hidden revelations, their encounter would change their lives forever. Clara Reynolds felt her chest tighten as she settled into the narrow economy seat. The cushions were hard, the passengers' perfume less than pleasant, and the constant murmur of conversations made her nervous. She clutched her bag, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. How had she ended up here, after paying for a first-class ticket? Next to her, a businessman in a suit adjusted his glasses and feigned indifference. Clara glanced around. All the passengers seemed engrossed in their screens or conversations, but she had the impression that everyone was looking at her, judging her distress. She went back to the flight attendant, ready to protest once again. "Excuse me. I think there's been a mistake. I was supposed to be in first class." This time, the flight attendant lowered her voice slightly. "I understand, Ms. Reynolds, but there's been a last-minute change. The seat is required for a VIP passenger." "I'm sorry." Clara felt a surge of anger and humiliation. VIP? Who could possibly deserve to be chased away like this? She clenched her fists, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Jonathan Reynolds watched the cabin's security cameras. He saw Clara, his wife, being removed from first class. His heart sank, but he quickly looked away. He had never imagined their marriage would lead to this kind of confrontation. A few minutes later, takeoff began. Clara looked out the window, the ground slowly receding. Her mind was racing. Who would have thought that, on a simple flight, she would feel so small, so invisible? And yet, this humiliation would be the starting point for a series of unexpected events. For Clara did not yet know that her husband, the man behind this company, was just a few meters away, and that this trip would bring them closer, or break them apart forever. Clara tried to calm herself by feigning interest in the in-flight magazine. But each page she turned seemed empty, as if the whole world conspired to remind her of her humiliation. The murmurs around her, the furtive glances, and the smug smiles of the VIP passengers passing by only made her angrier. Then, a movement caught her attention. An elegant man, his face serious, sat down a few rows in front of her. He possessed that quiet charisma one notices unexpectedly. He didn't say a word to her, but Clara had the curious feeling that his eyes had rested on her. Not with disdain, but with a kind of recognition. She looked away, confused. Was she being paranoid? Or was there really something in that look that had struck her? A few moments later, an announcement was made in the cabin. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, some VIP passengers will be traveling with us today. Thank you for your understanding." Clara felt a shiver run through her. VIP passengers, again, she murmured to herself. But a part of her was beginning to understand. There was more to it than she had been told. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Jonathan Reynolds couldn't tear his eyes away from the camera pointed at economy class. He saw Clara, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself as small as possible. His heart sank. Why did she have to go through this, he thought. He knew that he was, indirectly, the one who had caused this humiliation. But Jonathan couldn't reveal himself yet. Protocols, social protocol, and above all their complex past, made any approach delicate. Yet, he knew he couldn't leave it like this. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Clara felt a mixture of anger, curiosity, and fear. Who was that mysterious man a few rows ahead of her? And why did she have this strange feeling of déjà vu? A journey that had begun with humiliation was only just beginning, and fate seemed ready to confront her with truths she had never imagined. Clara spent the rest of the flight brooding over her anger and frustration. Every time she thought about her seat in first class, her cheeks flushed red. She wondered why a VIP passenger had the right to kick her out like that, and why no one had stood up for her. Suddenly, a calm, deep voice was heard next to her. "Mrs. Reynolds, you seem upset." Clara jumped. She turned her head and saw the elegant man from a few rows ahead, now sitting next to her. His gaze was no longer merely intriguing, it was charged with an intensity she couldn't ignore. "Who are you?" Clara asked defensively. The man gave a slight smile. "Jonathan. Jonathan Reynolds. Your husband." The shock left her speechless. Her eyes widened, her mouth remained open. What? You're my husband?" Jonathan nodded slowly, his face grave. "Yes. I know it's complicated. And I also know this situation is humiliating for you. Believe me, it wasn't my intention to make you suffer." Clara felt her heart clench. She had lived for years without seeing the man she was legally married to, believing their bond to be distant and unreal. And now here he was, just inches away, the man responsible for her recent humiliation. You own the company?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, and I had no idea you'd be taking this flight." "If I had known," Jonathan sighed, interrupted by the sound of the engines. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I really am. I never meant for you to feel this way." For the first time since the start of the flight, Clara felt a mixture of anger, confusion, and emotion. Her husband, the man who had turned her life upside down, was right in front of her, vulnerable and sincere. The rest of the flight passed in a tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Clara reflected on what this encounter meant for them, and Jonathan wondered how to repair this broken bond, while respecting the humiliation she had just suffered. Upon landing, it was clear that this flight had not only moved a passenger from one class to another, it had opened the door to an inevitable confrontation and a series of events that would change their lives forever. The plane had just landed, and Clara was walking down the steps, her heart pounding. She needed air, to understand what had just happened, and above all to digest this revelation. Jonathan Reynolds, her husband, was behind this company, and behind her humiliation. She entered the airport terminal, pulling her suitcase behind her. The fluorescent lights and the noise of the announcements seemed amplified by her agitation. She sensed a presence behind her. "Clara, wait." She turned around and saw him, Jonathan, looking both anxious and determined. He approached slowly, as if he feared her reaction. "What does this mean?" Clara asked, her voice trembling but firm. "How can you chase me off your own flight and then reappear as if nothing happened?" Jonathan lowered his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. "I simply wanted to protect an important passenger. I didn't think it would be you, and I never meant to hurt you." Clara shook her head. "You don't understand. It was humiliating. Everyone could see. I felt tiny. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll find a way to fix this, I promise." His voice was sincere, but Clara didn't know if she could still trust him. A heavy silence fell between them. Passengers moved about, some casting curious glances at the couple in the midst of their confrontation. Clara realized then that this public encounter wouldn't be confined to the plane. Her husband, her past, and this humiliation would now follow her to the ground. You can't just make up for everything with excuses, Jonathan. His voice was gentle, yet sharp. You have to understand what it's like to be invisible and powerless in the face of someone who should be protecting you. Jonathan nodded, his jaw clenched. I understand. I'll do everything I can to change that. But you have to let me show you. Clara took a deep breath, knowing this confrontation was just the beginning. A mix of anger, confusion, and a glimmer of hope, she sensed their story had just reached a turning point. The game of power and pride had barely begun, and the decisions they made in the coming hours could change everything. After landing, Jonathan insisted on driving Clara to her final destination, despite her initial resistance. She reluctantly agreed, aware that it would be difficult to ignore him after their connection was revealed. In Jonathan's car, the silence was heavy. Clara stared out the window, watching the landscape go by without really seeing it. Jonathan, meanwhile, nervously tapped the steering wheel, searching for the right words. Clara. I know I made a huge mistake, but I want to make things right. I want you to know that I respect you, and that I care about you. Clara finally turned her head towards him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You don't understand, it's not just about apologies. It's the way you publicly humiliated me. It's as if everything I am has no value to you. Jonathan took a deep breath. I know. And that's why I want to prove to you that I can do better. I can't erase what happened, but I can show you that I can be someone you can rely on. Clara felt her heart clench. The words were sincere, but the wounds were still fresh. She wanted to resent him, push him away, but a part of her was curious to see how far he would go to redeem himself. Very well. She said finally, her voice trembling. Show me. But know that I won't let myself be walked all over. Jonathan gave a small, relieved smile. I wouldn't expect anything less. During the flight, an unexpected call came in to Clara's phone from the flight attendant. She hesitated before answering. Ms. Reynolds. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened on board. I had no idea it was you. Clara felt a strange warmth wash over her. Even though she was still angry, this small gesture of acknowledgement of her humiliation made her think. Perhaps, just perhaps, some things could be fixed. Upon arriving at his hotel, Jonathan held out his hand. Let me help you get settled in. Then. I'll leave you alone, if that's what you want. Clara hesitated, then took his hand, aware that a new dynamic had just been established between them, between anger, defiance and a nascent curiosity. Their relationship had just entered a new stage. But fate would not grant them long respite. Surprises and revelations already awaited them, ready to shatter their fragile reconciliation. The next morning, Clara woke up with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. It had been a short night, and her mind kept replaying yesterday's confrontation. She knew Jonathan was doing his best to redeem himself, but she couldn't ignore the weight of the humiliation she had suffered. As she went down to the hotel lobby to have breakfast, she heard an announcement. Today we welcome a special guest for a private event hosted by Reynolds Airlines. Clara frowned and stepped forward, intrigued despite herself. To her surprise, Jonathan appeared, dressed in an impeccable suit, smiling but serious. Clara. I know you don't have to attend, but I'd like you to see this. Curious and wary, she followed him to a luxurious room where a conference on aviation and Reynolds innovations was being held. The audience applauded warmly as Jonathan took the stage. Clara watched from afar, noting how he captivated the room, his presence and charisma. He wasn't the distant man she had known, but a respected leader, capable of inspiring and captivating with his mere presence. Then, an unexpected incident occurred. One of the speakers fell ill just before his presentation. The audience began to murmur in concern. Jonathan immediately stepped in, speaking calmly and authoritatively, and improvised the presentation, captivating the audience with precise details and impressive ease. Clara was speechless. This man, whom she had seen humiliating a passenger, herself, just a few hours earlier, had just demonstrated impressive courage and skill. She felt her judgment waver. He wasn't just her distant and authoritarian husband, he possessed qualities she had never imagined. At the end of the presentation, Jonathan came down from the stage and approached her. "So, what do you think?" he asked with a shy smile. Clara, still impressed and a little unsettled, simply replied, You're really different from what I thought." Jonathan nodded, aware that this day had just created new ground between them, between admiration, tension and curiosity. Clara and Jonathan's relationship was beginning to transform, and the surprises were only just beginning. A few days after the event, Clara agreed to continue seeing Jonathan, but she kept her distance. She knew he was trying to redeem himself, but mistrust remained. That morning, Jonathan invited him to visit Reynolds Airlines headquarters. "I want to show you what goes on behind the scenes, and how we manage everything." Clara hesitated, but accepted. She wanted to understand this world of which he was a part, and see if behind the authoritarian man, there was something else. Everything was going smoothly until a problem arose. A recently developed prototype delivery drone accidentally activated in the main hall. The machines began spinning dangerously, threatening employees and visitors. Clara felt the panic rising. People were running in all directions, alarms were blaring, and she found herself trapped, unable to escape because of an overturned piece of furniture. Jonathan, seeing the scene on the surveillance cameras, rushed over immediately. With a precise and quick movement, he neutralized the drone and secured the area, while guiding Clara out of danger. Breathless, Clara looked at him with astonishment and a little fear. You could have left me," she murmured. Jonathan gently took her arm. "Never. No matter our differences, I will never let anything happen to you." At that precise moment, Clara realized something. Behind the distant and authoritarian man hid a man capable of courage, devotion, and protection. And for the first time since they had met, she felt her anger soften, replaced by a more complex emotion, admiration, and perhaps the beginnings of trust. As they left the secure hall together, Clara realized that their relationship had just reached a crucial stage. Their pasts, their mistakes, and even the humiliations of the robbery seemed to fade away before this new glimpse of Jonathan. But fate, true to its sense of drama, still had trials and revelations in store. After the drone incident, Clara and Jonathan took a moment to relax in Jonathan's private office. The atmosphere was strange, neither entirely tense nor completely relaxed. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap while Jonathan busied himself arranging some documents on his desk. "Clara, there's something you need to know." Her voice, usually steady, trembled slightly. Clara looked up, intrigued and cautious. "What now?" she asked, half amused, half suspicious. Jonathan sat down opposite her, his hands clasped. "Years ago, before our marriage, I made mistakes. Mistakes I never shared with you. Some had consequences for my family, for my company, and for you, indirectly." Clara felt a shiver run through her. She knew the man she had married by name, but she knew nothing of his real life. "What mistakes?" she asked softly. He took a deep breath. "When we got married, I had to protect a very sensitive matter. I made difficult, sometimes unfair, decisions for the good of my company, and I never wanted you to be involved in that. That's why we lived so far apart. But I realize now that you were a victim, even without knowing it." Clara felt her heart clench. She had always believed their marriage was a simple legal arrangement, but behind that veil lay a world she could never have imagined. She had been excluded, kept apart, not for lack of love, but for protection and misplaced pride. Jonathan continued, his voice softer. "I know I can't erase the past, but I want you to know that everything I do now, I do with you in mind. And I never want you to feel powerless or humiliated again." Clara remained silent, her eyes filled with tears. Part of her wanted to scream, other parts wanted to believe in him. She realized she couldn't ignore the growing mix of anger, pain, and admiration within her. At that moment, they both understood that their relationship was undergoing a profound change. Secrets were no longer barriers, they were bridges to a deeper understanding. But before they could explore this new closeness, another surprise, this time even more overwhelming, awaited them, ready to test their trust and courage. A few days after Jonathan's revelations, Clara began to feel a strange connection forming between them. They shared shy smiles, more open conversations, and even moments of laughter. But fate would not allow them time to savor this respite. One morning, while Clara was visiting a charity site supported by Reynolds Airlines, an alarm sounded. A fire had just broken out in the main warehouse. Black smoke rose rapidly, and firefighters were already battling the flames. Clara felt panic rising within her. Employees and volunteers were running in all directions, some trapped behind debris. She found herself stuck, unable to escape. Jonathan arrived on the scene a few minutes later, dressed casually but with a determined air. Without hesitation, he stepped through the smoke, guiding Clara and others toward the exit. His poise, composure, and courage were impressive. Clara, breathless, followed him step by step. Jonathan. I never would have believed that you would be capable of. Her voice trembled, half from fear, half from admiration. Don't speak, just follow me, he shouted, but his gaze was reassuring. Every gesture, every decision showed that he truly cared for her. Finally, they reached the outside, collapsing onto the sidewalk, flames illuminating the sky behind them. Clara, breathless but unharmed, felt her heart pounding wildly. She turned her head towards him, and in his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before: determination, protectiveness, silent love. The barriers she had erected were beginning to fall. Jonathan, also panting, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Clara nodded, unable to speak. What she was feeling was too complex: fear, relief, admiration, and the beginnings of renewed confidence. That day, amidst the smoke and chaos, Clara understood something essential. Despite the humiliations, secrets, and distances of the past, Jonathan was ready to fight for her. And for the first time, she envisioned a future where they could truly be together. But the final chapter, the denouement, would hold yet another surprise that would seal their story. After the fire and the ordeals that followed, Clara and Jonathan had found a fragile equilibrium. Their relationship, marked by anger, secrets, and surprises, had gradually given way to trust and understanding. But fate wasn't finished playing with them. A few weeks later, Clara received an unexpected message: a ticket for a special first-class flight, courtesy of Reynolds Airlines. Intrigued, she went to the airport, her heart filled with a mixture of nervousness and apprehension. Upon her arrival, she was greeted with a familiar smile. Jonathan stood there, impeccable and charming, but this time without any distance or formality. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Reynolds, to your first-class seat. This time, you're the VIP," he said, extending his hand. Clara felt a mixture of laughter and tears rising within her. She took his hand, and for the first time, she felt respected and acknowledged, not only as a passenger, but as a woman and partner. As she settled in, Jonathan sat down opposite her. "I know we started this story with mistakes and humiliations, but I want the rest of our journey, and our lives, to be different." Clara looked at him, her heart overflowing with emotion. I'm ready to believe you this time." The flight took off, and for the first time, Clara felt a serenity she had never known in first class. Clouds drifted by outside, but inside, another journey was beginning, one of reconciliation, rediscovered love, and a renewed sense of connection after so many trials. Jonathan gently took her hand. "For everything we've been through, thank you for staying, despite everything." Clara smiled, her eyes shining. "And thank you for showing me who you really are, even behind the mistakes." Their story, which began with humiliation and secrets, ended on a note of trust and love. First class, once a symbol of privilege and power, was now a symbol of respect and complicity. And Clara knew that, this time, no obstacle, no secret, could separate them.